Hey, welcome to this week's episode of the Open House Show. I'm your host, Jesse Meadow. This week we have a very good show for you. Some interesting revamping of the admissions processes, the way of thinking. We're going to be doing all of this through the DEI lens, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a great guest to talk about some of the initiatives that they've done in their school. Mrs. Rakiya Brown, Director of Enrollment Management at the Hillbrook School. Let's bring her on without further ado. Hey, Rakiya, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Fantastic. Can't complain. Got a little cold front that came into Florida, kind of teased us with spring. And so now I got to put a sweater on. It's a little chilly.
Yeah, I'm in Northern California. So we have the chilly mornings, really warm afternoons, and then it's chilly again in the evenings.
Excellent. All right. So, bringing our guest up to speed, we had the pre-show meeting. We were going to be initially talking about, rethinking it, the inquiries and parent questionnaires. And through discussion, I find out all of these different things that you guys have implemented, and it was all through a DEI lens. And it came about that this is the subject. I mean, this is a great thing that you guys have done over there. And, I want to talk about it. I want to make sure others know about it so that they can implement it in their school or, maybe change up some things on how they do things. I think it's going to be a great conversation. So I'm excited to talk about it. Before that, let's get the audience to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your journey in admissions, how you ended up at the Hillbrook School, and what kind of excites you about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I come from a family of educators. My grandmother, I'm from Baltimore originally, and so she still works in the Baltimore City public school system. And so I've always seen educators all my life. After graduating from college, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was like, maybe I want to work in schools. So I started working in independent schools right out of college. So I taught in pre-K classrooms. I taught kindergarten at a pre-K 12 all-boys school. And then I got to a point where I was like wanting more. Kindergarten was a main entry point at the school I worked at in Baltimore. And so I did a lot of work with the admissions office, whether it was speaking at admissions events, helping with kindergarten admissions testing, chatting with prospective parents. And I really loved that work because I loved meeting new people. So I wanted to do that kind of more full time. My husband and I we wanted to move to California. We don't have kids. We were like, this is the time. And so we just kind of started applying to schools in California, hoping for the best. And so we landed in Palo Alto. I had a job at another school. And then I transitioned to Hillbrook School because one of my friends became the first full-time director of diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'm excited to be at Hillbrook. The work really excites me because I was an anthropology major in college. And so I studied cultural anthropology, and I just love and am fascinated by people and their stories. And so in this field, as you know, you get to meet all kinds of different people with interesting stories. And it's the thing that excites me most about this work.
Yeah, you definitely do. You never know what families coming in and their story, why they're there. You can hear so many different types of situations where families come from, and especially when not so much for your school, but when you throw in the boarding aspect and you have the international families coming in. I mean, it's just the whole array of storytelling gets so much bigger. Tell us a little bit about the Hillbrook School. Plug it a little bit here.
Yeah.
So we can get up to speed on where you're coming from, and then as we get further into the conversation, how it's being implemented, what are we talking about as far as a school?
Yeah, so Hillbrook School is a junior kindergarten through 8th grade school in Silicon Valley. We're in Los Gatos, so we're not too far from San Jose. We're not too far from Stanford. So we're right in the heart of the valley. We are a school that was founded in 1935, and we were founded with this kind of project-based, hands-on learning environment. And so there are a couple of things that I love a lot about Hillbrook. One, we sit on a 14-acre campus, and it's a beautiful campus with lots of outdoor space. We have a creek, we have hills. Kids are able to be children at Hillbrook. They're able to kind of run wild and be free. It's something I really love about this place. But we're also a place, I always think of it in kind of 3 different buckets. We're a place that's really intellectually rigorous. And so our approach to teaching and learning is really about the kid and placing kind of student choice and engagement at the center of the experience. The second thing is what we're going to talk a lot about today is we are committed to diversity, equity, inclusion. We don't just walk the walk. We talk the talk, but we really walk the walk really well. It's, you can see it, like we live it in our mission and values. Every decision that we make is through a DEI lens. And then the third thing I would say too is that we are kind of one of the first schools with we have the Scott Center for Social Entrepreneurship, where we're getting kids to think about like what matters to them and where they're doing about it. So we're providing them like access and ideas and tools to kind of make a difference in the world, which is directly tied to our vision as a school.
Well, that sounds excellent. I mean, especially that entrepreneurship, you know, there's so many times where kids, you know, even myself back when I was in high school, you know, like you have these ideas, or even when you're younger, but, you know, there's no realistic way for you to implement them. Unless you have guidance from home, you know, how are you really going to figure out how to really make this dream of yours actionable?
Yes.
So adding that layer to your program, that's great. That's great. So, you know, take us back a little bit, you know, the transition process, you know, coming into admissions, seeing what the setup is there, and then, you know, how you wanted to revamp it. Give us a little bit of that process and background of kind of how you came about saying, hey, this is what we need to do, and we need to make these changes, and why.
Yeah, of course, whenever you start a job, I don't know, I just really fundamentally believe this, but you go into it year one and you do the thing the way that it's always been done.
Mm-hmm.
And you make kind of small changes because you don't know the process fully until you live it for a full cycle, for a full year. And so I did that for my first year. And I remember being slightly terrified the first kind of group tour I had to do, because it was like, I don't know, week 3 of the job, and I have 12 parents staring at me, and this is my first time giving a group tour. And I immediately knew like that was one of the things I wanted to change. While I'm a performer at heart, I grew up in musical theater and I perform, and I'm like comfortable on a stage in front of people. I knew that the only way to really like sell a school and also to learn more about the family was to be one-on-one. So that was one of the things that I learned in that like terrifying moment of standing in front of a group of people. And I'm like, am I going to mess this up? So that was one of the things that I thought a lot about. The other thing, obviously, is that like we're in a market in the South Bay, which is like slightly south of the peninsula, which is closer to Stanford. This is a lot of information, but our market is different here. And so families are entering the process at various different points in our kind of admissions funnel, where up on the peninsula, families are entering all at the same time. And so I really needed to think through ways of like, how can I keep people engaged throughout the funnel process, no matter where they enter? So thinking about kind of individualized emails and segmentation was kind of the second thing I thought about. And then the pandemic happened, and it forced us to obviously pivot and reevaluate our practices, thinking about like access and equity too. And so that really helped us kind of transition to the process that we're using today.
That's awesome. I mean, I would agree with you. You know, those group tours can be, you know, effective when there's no other option and at least someone's on campus. But that one-on-one time, you know, that's how you really want to give a tour for the families. You know, you want them to be able to experience the place and answer any questions, get a feel for it. Every family, like you said earlier, is going to have that different story and different reason for being there. So, you know, meeting that story, meeting that reason, and discussing how that might fit or not fit, you know, depending on the family with your institution, you know, that's key. And that starts you guys off on the right foot. The family can get a better understanding too. So that's a great change to make. And then, you know, when you're talking about accessibility, obviously all schools, you know, well, I hope all schools, every school I've talked to, has transitioned to more of this digital model. They had to.
Yeah.
No one can be on campus. You know, some, depending on where you were and the state regulations, you know, it was a little bit more possible than others. But generally speaking, you had to be able to continue business as much as usual. You know, as far as enrolling kids, showing the school, getting your name out there, but now you have to do it digitally. And, you know, creating those, you know, Zoom coffees like you were talking about, and making sure that there was accessibility to the families in your area to be able to see the campus and have that one-on-one time with you. That's crucial. You know, transitioning to the next part, you know, along with that process for you was, you know, creating this digital bank of information. Tell us a little bit about that, how it works, how families have been responding to it.
Yeah, this has been a year where, I mean, obviously every time we have an event, a parent who can't make it will say, is it being recorded, right? And that's never been the case of like any of our parent education series, back to school nights. And so this year, because we have so much recorded content from back to school night from our teachers, we have classroom sessions that have been recorded by our teachers. We've made so many videos. We're like, this is so easy to kind of slice and dice and share content in a way that's meaningful to families. So families who don't have access to come to an on-campus tour in the middle of their workday, we created like this tool bank of information for them to access. So there's video from back to school night that we kind of were able to kind of take and tailor for prospective families. There's videos from our like open houses if a family couldn't make it, opening remarks from our head of school, from our teachers that we kind of took and put into this bank for resources. We made faculty highlight videos this year to share more about who our teachers are at each grade level. That's in the virtual bank. And so what's been so interesting and exciting for us, because as a kind of consumer of the content, you're able to kind of watch on your own time and it's always available for you. You can stop and pause. And so families have been, so excited that they have access to this content. And we've never been able to do that before because everything's just like in person. You either show up or you don't.
That's right. And, I can imagine, it's one thing to have like a video bank of like promotional material, but it's another when you kind of have like in-house projects on there as well. Like you said, like opening remarks or things that give the prospective family the opportunity to feel like they're a part of the community already, and really kind of engage with you on a more of an internal level. That's an interesting part to add to that digital piece. I imagine the teachers are loving this because it kind of gives the families a good expectation of what to see in the classroom, right?
Yeah, and it's also like, it's not super polished, which I love too, right? It's not like we hired a firm and they came in and they made these amazing videos. It's just like, it's our teachers just teaching, right?
Yep.
Like they interrupt the Zoom lesson, but it's like, that's real life. Like if your kid is here, that's what the classroom experience may look like. And I think that's been great. It's also helped us in so many ways, which I think is a really positive thing, where families are kind of like self-eliminating themselves from the process. And so when looking at this bank of materials, whether it's like open house presentation or a classroom experience, they're able to get a real feel of like what our school is and what we're about. And they're like, actually, this is not the kind of school that I'm looking for, which helps everybody because it's like, we don't want to enroll a family and they're actually not interested in the kind of information or our approach to teaching and learning. So I think it's been positive all around.
Well, the brilliant thing and the amazing, impactful thing that independent schools have, among many, is their individual mission statements. What is their purpose and what are they trying to instill within their community, and that can vary depending on what the situation is and where you are and the reasons behind that. And sometimes it's not right for the family. And you're right. You're gonna deal with that one way or another if they end up coming. So you got to find that balance of meeting budget, but also having the right culture and the right students that are there as well. I mean, that's the constant admissions journey every enrollment season. But I think that it does give them a great insight. And on two fronts off the top of my head, you figured the stealth applicant is there. It's only going to grow. My generation, our generation is we're on the phone. I'm going to do my research. 80% of that sales process is done before I even contact you. Now you're giving me material that will give me a better understanding of what I'm researching. And then, on the other end, it's a good answer for shadow days. A lot of schools have, kids where they can come in and shadow through the day so they can understand what classes are like. Obviously, that's almost impossible in some areas because of the pandemic and the mitigation that you're going to have to do as a school. Well, here's your answer. You know what I mean? You can have some of these digital banks where they can understand what a science class is like. They can understand what it's going to be like in an English environment. So it kind of helps in so many different ways to have something like this where you can have some raw material, promotional stuff too, but a real feel for what's going on in the school on a day-to-day basis.
Yep.
Yeah. So Part of that process, I imagine, I know we talked about how you can narrowly, get specific interests out, especially with this video log now, you can, if they have a science interest, or if they have a, athletic interest of some sort, we can create and tailor some information that goes out to that family. And obviously that starts with the inquiry form. So I know there was a lot of changes that, you've done with the inquiry form. With the digital database that was able to do it. But tell us a little bit about, some of the questionnaires that you changed and the thinking behind that, and how that's really been benefiting you in your enrollment season.
Yeah, so our inquiry form used to have at the bottom of it just kind of a short answer box where families could write in what they were interested in learning more about. 9 times out of 10, parents would leave it blank because it's really, you want your inquiry form to be like as easy as possible. And so they would leave it blank because get to the inquiry form and they're like, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm going to submit an inquiry. They're going to give me what I need. So what we did was we created a series of check boxes where parents can check however many things that they're interested in. And we made it specific to our school community. So diversity, equity, inclusion was a box, social and emotional learning, hands-on project-based learning, ed tech and the student experience, parent education events. And so parents could kind of check which one of those things that they're interested in. And from there, we were able to segment our inquiry emails so that families were getting actually the information that was like most interesting to them. And even when parents didn't check like diversity, equity, and inclusion, we still would send them that email because I'm like, you didn't check it, but trust me, you want to know what we're doing as a school. So that was one of the things we did for all inquiries, whether or not they checked that box. And so that was able to give us more information. Once a family fills out an inquiry form, we're able to segment in time and send the kind of specific emails. And then when they come in for a one-on-one tour, you're able to speak to exactly what they want to know. And with this hands-on learning, you're going to show them 5,000 examples of what hands-on learning looks at Hillbrook. Or if it's the Ed Parent Education Series, you're going to have examples of these are the educational parent events that we've had for our families over the past year and a half, right? And so you're able to be very specific in your tour with what families want to know and care most about, right? It's kind of like philanthropy work. You got to figure out what people care about, and then you got to figure out how to get them to give you money with what they care about. It's the same thing with admissions. And so that was in terms of inquiry form, how we shifted that. And it's helped us a lot this year, like really get to the core of what parents want to know more about.
Well, both yourself and the parents, they're busy. Time is valuable. So, when they come for a tour, like, yeah, it's great. I want to see everything in the school. But if I have a specific interest, like, let's highlight that. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're not going to let a family go from a tour or from some form of communication without giving them the overall view of the school. But you can highlight and you can really focus in on what their interests are, by redoing it. The one thing that I liked a lot, and this is kind of going to trickle into the application part, is that the changes that you made, while yes, it makes it specific for an interest and it makes it easier for you to segment, your families and approach them in those manners, but it's ideological. These are philosophical kind of ideals that you're talking about, and how the families feel about that. It really gives them the expectation up front of who you guys are and what to expect. But on the other end, what are they to you? Like, how is this family going to fit in here based off these answers? This tells me a lot. So, how did you come about was even the inquiry questions part of that DEI lens?
So we didn't have any questions on our inquiry form, just check boxes to make it as easy as possible. But that really, for a family who, for example, didn't check the DEI box, like, why didn't they check that? Is this like not important to them? Or do they know a lot about DEI in their own world or in the work that they do in their job, right? And so that gave us a little bit of information, but kind of the questions that we asked that were specific DEI questions came once a family submitted a formal application to our school.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about that. Those changes in the application. What kind of thinking went into that? Did you come up with it on yourself? Did you pool in different persons around the school? Like, how did we revamp that? And what was the goal in revamping those questions on that application?
Yeah, our questions, first we separate it from the application itself. So our application form used to have kind of all the basic information that you would put in, the grade you're applying to, where you live, all of that. And then our short answer questions were tied to that application. So before you could even submit an application to our school, whether or not you knew anything about it, you had to fill out your kind of basic information and answer the short answer questions before you pay the fee. So I was like, that doesn't sound great to me, because some people might just want to apply and then have a little bit more time to think through how they want to respond to those questions. So we took out the short answer questions from the kind of application form and then made it like a step as part of completing the application process. Because there were many families who would want to tour at first or come for a virtual coffee and learn more about the school before really answering those questions, in particular if they were serious about attending Hillbrook.
Right.
And so that was one step. We like separated the questions from kind of the like basic form. And then when looking at the questions, I found when I did this project last summer where I was building kind of family personas, thinking through the marketing lens. And you would look at the data and I was like, I don't know anything about these families. They answer these questions and I still like don't know anything about them. All I know is why they want to attend Hillbrook and like, what do they do with, what do their kids do for extracurricular activities? Like there was no information. And I was like, okay, so there's an opportunity to change this. So I was reading a little bit and I was like, and then there's no question about like a person's like experience with DEI at all. And if that is a core value of who we are, we should probably ask about that in the questionnaire. So I read a couple of things through Enrollment Management Association. There were some great kind of threads. And I was like, we really should be trying to interview for narrative. And when I say that is we want to get people to tell their stories. And this is like the anthropologist in me. I want you to tell me your story, right? Like what matters to you. And so we framed our questions around this idea, which we truly believe is that everybody in our community teaches and learns. And so what can you teach us and what can we learn from you? And you learn so much. That's the first question that on our questionnaire. And you learn so much about a family, about like what's important to them, what they feel like they can offer to the community, what they hope to learn from us. And that gives us like really good data once a family in our community about like, okay, they're expecting that we will do this for them as a commitment, right? And so that's something that I'm able to pass along to our teachers. And then the other question I asked was centered around like cultural competency. So we, at a school, created our own kind of diversity, equity, inclusion teaching philosophy this past summer. And so it's like a couple of points where we ground all of our teaching and learning in DEI work. And so some of the phrasing on that question around cultural competency is directly pulled from our teaching philosophy. And so we're just asking people, like, what is your journey with cultural competency? And like, was there an event or something that happened to you that really like moved the needle forward? And you get so many different kinds of answers. And again, so much data around like, where is a family? And it's okay. You might be at the beginning of your journey. We can support you. You might be in the middle, or you are like feeling very culturally competent. All things are good, but it's just important for us to know where folks are.
Well, and it's important to with any admissions rep, that you try to build that personality of who is the student, who are the families that are here, who are the families that are doing well here, so that you can try to find those same type of families, the psychographic data and things like that. Questions like this, really give you a good base of who the family is. It gets them thinking also on their end about these issues and what they're going to be challenged with as coming to this school. And on the other end, it also gives you a good idea of who this family is, where they came from. What is some common denominators in all of these. You know what I mean? This is how we can build that psychographic data without using a program. Like you can do this on your own. If they enroll, you could always go back to these questions and say, okay, well, this is the type of student. Here's another one. And you just kind of keep going, and you can just build this data set. You build this persona of the type of student that you want to find. And then that can help narrow the process down and optimize your admissions process even further down the road.
Yeah, the cultural competency question, so many times when reading admissions files, a parent would start answering that question with like, the fact that you're even asking this question is proof that I want to be a part of this community, right? Like that in itself, like the kinds of questions you ask give parents so much information about the kind of school and community and your values. And so that made me feel good too, of like, wow, parents are really seeing that we're like asking this question that is tough to answer. It requires you to think, but the sole reason of us asking that is really inspiring them to really be kind of committed to joining our community. It was also just really powerful.
Particularly for me, what excited me the most was that you went from inquiry form to tour to application, and every piece of that, you gave the family a piece of yourself or an expectation of what this school is about and what they could expect when they come here. So often that's really done in the tour.
Yeah.
And then, through communications, emails or question answering and things like this. But, when they get to the application, it's standard. Or when they get to, an inquiry form, it's standard. But, through these little processes, what do they check? What do they not check? The options that they have through to the questions in the application. It really continues to give that family a good and expectation of what their child will be, influenced by and be involved in when they come to your campus, which is really a key point, to be able to go through all three of those steps and still get that feeling. That's a great transition on the admissions side.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were some, as we kind of get to the end here, what were some notable successes? I mean, you implemented this 2 years ago, this year?
This year.
Okay, so this is the first enrollment season we're going through with this process.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess it might be a little early, but have you noticed anything? What were some notable successes that you may have seen so far? Whether that be parent feedback or the type of students that you're getting. What has been generated the buzz, I guess, from this process?
Yeah, I would say the feedback that we're getting from families, they feel like when they get to, because now we're in decision week right now, we released admissions decisions last Thursday, and so like now we wait, which is like painful.
Yeah.
But I think for families, it's like they know so much about our school because the process has been so individualized, and I think that's like a really noticeable like marker of success. Again, it's still too early. I would also say, which I think is successful, and I alluded to this earlier, families who decide to kind of like withdraw their application, right? Or say, actually, this isn't the school for me. And I think the more we can do that kind of like shuffling up front before a family decides to enroll, the better, because it just solves, it just like lessens the number of like not great conversations you have to have with families about our program and our values and what we believe and the topics that we might cover when kids are at our school. So I think that's a huge like marker of success too, is that we're really in this process that's individualized through the inquiry form, tour, application questions, that families really know who we are. And through that, they're able to say, yep, I really want to be in this community, or like, actually, no, thank you. And there are other choices, right? There are other choices. I think that's been really successful. And then for me, on just like a personal front, I actually know these families and I know these kids. And when we send out personalized admissions letters for every kid, which is a lot of work, right? So we write a paragraph for every single child as if they're already at our school, right? It's like a narrative. And so parents are just amazed that I know them and their kids so well, but I've spent so much time with them in the process that when I'm excited to offer them admission, I can like write about their child in really beautiful ways. And I think that is also just like another like marker of success of, these kids, this family. So those would be the 3 points that I would make.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning process, with most schools, it's obviously the admissions is that first touch that families have to the school. It's so important to have that first impression. And then, from there through the enrollment process, what are you doing through the enrollment process, and especially those first few weeks of school, to acclimate those kids and really give them that experience. And, through every step of that process, because it's so personalized, because the questions are phrased in such a way that you need to give relative and personal feedback, you have a connection with them that's stronger through that process than previously. And I got to say, the culture on campus, every campus I've been on, there's a lot to be said for the faculty, staff, administrators, and such, but the students. I mean, the students make up that culture. You know, when you have a student body that is bought in, and you know, just the problems you have are normal adolescent problems, not so much philosophically with the school. I mean, that campus can really grow, and all of the individuals in it with each other through that same mission statement. And sometimes, like you said, there's more options, but you don't have to choose that. And sometimes schools aren't right for you. And sometimes schools are the most perfect school that you could ever imagine. And you're so lucky to be a part of it. So, you know, weeding out, I could agree with you. That's definitely a part of success, is being able to make sure that that culture stays intact in the school.
Yep.
Awesome. So, I'm trying to think of some follow-ups, but I think we've covered a lot here. You know, I guess you've had some good successes. You know, I'd love to hear, and I definitely want to give an update, you know, maybe next fall on how things are going, and how this enrollment season created the functioning that you guys have right now, and the student body that's going to be there next year. But with this train of thought, are we going to be expanding this? I mean, this is a real big mission, a values thing for your school. Are we expanding this type of thinking, this type of revamping questionnaires and such into other departments, or are we focusing it more on the admission side?
Yeah, it's now become like in everything that we do, which is really exciting. So we created an inclusivity statement in 2015. And then this past summer with our full-time DEI director, they created the teaching philosophy. Mm-hmm. We have these questions in the admissions process that we're asking, because we're like the first screeners, right, of welcoming families. But we're also thinking about this on a larger, more strategic level, at the board level, of thinking about kind of having some DEI screening tools, questions to use and implement with every decision that we make. So whether it's like, what lunch provider are we using, or what bus system company are we using? Or like, let's think about the themes that we're teaching in JK through second grade in our literacy program with a DI lens. We're creating kind of like this screening tool, but which we like to say it's like a lens of like thinking about every decision that we make through DEI. And so it's a lot of work. And obviously the biggest fear is that we create this kind of tool/lens and we never use it or become paralyzed by it. But I think it's still exciting. Like, we're at the beginning stages of doing that work across all departments. And it's easier, right, when you think about your program, the books that you're reading, the people that you bring in. But when you think about it from like more strategic issues or strategy, it's much harder. But we're like committed. We're committed to the work.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to be, that's for sure. You know, because it's easy for, I shouldn't say it's easy, but it comes more easily to people that are already in that frame of mind. They see things through that lens already, making it to where it's a protocol for people that aren't always in there, but they do need to stay inside of this. That's that difficult part. You know, how do you write this down on paper? This is just how you should think, you know, but that's not everybody. Making sure that they're holding that standard, making sure that they're doing the research on whatever it is, like you said, staffing and contractors and things like this. You know, that will take some time to sift through. But I think the important part is conversations. As long as there's conversations around it, you could build that plan together. And I think it's a great thing. You know, whoever is watching from your school, you know, keep doing what you're doing. You know, make the best out of it. It's a great mission. It's timely. It's needed. And, you know, I hope that you expand it into all other areas, because I think what you got going on in the admissions side is really going to help you out as far as a data collection, persona, and that connection with the family. It's just only going to get deeper when you start getting questions like this and being able to back that up with other decisions around the other departments. So, you know, moving on to a little bit, I always want to hear, we haven't had someone from your area. So, you know, regional update, what are you seeing in admissions in California? I know you guys have been up and down, you know, with, you know, state mandates and things of this nature. So, you know, what are you guys seeing right now? How are things going with enrollment in Los Gatos?
Yeah, so it's been, I mean, as you can imagine, once the administration came back to campus in June, right? So we went into shelter in place, and then in June we came back to campus when kids weren't here. It just I felt like it was a new admission season, because so many families from public schools were like interested in the private school education, and they never would have been, because we're in an area with really good school systems and really great schools. And
That's
so at Hillbrook in particular, the amount of inquiries and interest from public school families just like skyrocketed, like huge uptick. And so it's been a year of me living in 2 admission seasons. So living in the one as we're preparing for next fall, but also still living in this school year, because we've enrolled so many students mid-year, particularly at our middle school level, and particularly in 5th and 6th grade. So it's just been crazy. And all schools that are in kind of the South Bay in my area have seen that too, of like families considering a private school education who've never considered it before. And so it's been exciting for us, because public schools it's our biggest competition. And so how do you get families who have made the decision to buy a house, a really expensive house in like a really nice neighborhood because of the schools, to consider paying more money for a private school education? But it's exciting because we've been trying to tap into that public school market for so many years, and we finally feel like we're in it. So the biggest challenge now is like, how do we keep that momentum going?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the topic all year. I mean, we've talked to several schools, and they had what we call the COVID boom. It's like their public options or their state mandates, or even if they were in public school, the way that they were handling digital learning and online learning, it wasn't up to par. So they're giving schools second looks. And the big story was, how do we retain those kids? When things get back to normal, how do we give them the value proposition that they are, a part of this community, they can never go back, and that is the task that you guys, not just admissions. I mean, that's going to be everybody on campus. That's going to be the teachers. That's going to be everyone that they interact with is going to have to give them that experience. And at the end of the day, you hope to retain those students. On the positive side, from what I'm hearing so far, at least in my world, that's happening. A lot of those kids are staying, and it's something they may never have experienced before, and now that they have, it's just really the only way. And then when you add in the layers of the mission statements of schools, especially yours, I mean, to be able to go to somewhere else after all of that community feel and all of that self-reflection and growth, that's going to be tough. I think you guys have a very good argument and case to make against the public schools around you. So not that they're the enemy, just, keeping them in your school enrolled and keeping them growth all the way through until they reach high school. I think that's very important. So, maybe you've already mentioned it, this could be it, but we always like to leave on a positive note. What do you think is going to be your biggest opportunity, this enrollment season?
Yeah, it's the public schools, and it's also getting to a point of really filling our middle school. So we grew our enrollment a few years ago, and then filling our middle school has been a little challenging. We were able to the first couple of years, and then we took like a big dip in our enrollment in terms of our middle school enrollment. And so I think that's the biggest opportunity here. We had so many, we enrolled like 20 new kids in our 5th and 6th grade mid-year. We had a new kid start today. And it's March 8th, and she's starting in our 6th grade, right? And so that's the biggest opportunity, is like generating that word of mouth around public school families, having families feel connected to the community so that they go out and talk about our school. It's a huge opportunity right now. And we have an advancement board committee, and those members of the board have been really instrumental in like helping us with word of mouth, in particular in the public school market sector. So huge opportunity for us. And I'm excited. I'm excited for the challenge.
Yeah, that's awesome. A kid coming in March, that's like, here's your enrollment contract and your re-enrollment contract at the same time. Go ahead and sign both.
Exactly. We have a kindergartner who's going to be starting in like a couple weeks, but we were like, yeah, you're going to sign that one, and then you sign your one for next year. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So yeah, exactly. That's
awesome.
where we are.
That's awesome. Well, Rakiya, I know you're busy. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today on a very important issue and some great, great insights. I think that anyone that's viewing this episode is definitely going to take something that they can bring back to their school and implement on their end. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Like I said, it was a great, great insights given by Rakiya Brown from the Hillbrook School. You can catch this full episode at schoolcraftdigital.com, our YouTube channel, and all of our social media channels, Schoolcraft Digital. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.